Hi, I'm Luna. On the morning of my birthday, my bank account was drained. $69,000. Gone. My mother laughed and said, "What were you gonna do? Buy yourself a cake?" And my father? He said, "The family needed it more." No apology, no shame, just expectation. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I quietly canceled the mortgage they thought I'd keep paying forever. But what came after was worse than theft. They didn't just take my money, they tried to erase me. So before we dive in, tell me, have you ever felt like your family only loved what you gave them? Let's begin. The first ping didn't wake me. The second one did. I groggily reached for my phone, squinting against the screen light as it glared through the dark. 2:14 a.m. A notification from my bank app glowed at the top. Alert, withdrawal of $69,000 posted. For a moment, my mind didn't register the number. I blinked, sat up, rubbed my eyes, tapped into the app. It was real. Every dollar I'd been saving, gone. I checked again. Not a mistake, not a hold, not pending. Posted. I stared at the number so long it started to blur. The chill in my spine had nothing to do with the cold night air slipping through my window. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and tapped through the transaction history. They didn't even try to hide it. Mortgage payment, personal check, a car loan, all of it in my name. No calls, no texts, no warning, no asking. I was still holding the phone when I hit dial. Dad's number. My hand trembled slightly, not from rage, not yet. From the shock. Like when you realize you've been in an accident but haven't felt the pain yet. It rang. The sound of a party bled through the line before anyone spoke. Laughter, music, then his voice. "Yeah? Dad?" I said, trying to keep the fear from leaking out. "Something's wrong. My account is almost empty. My card's been drained. Did something happen?" A beat of silence. Then he barked, "You're always so dramatic." I blinked, stunned. "The family needed help," he continued. "Your mom's hospital bills, your brother's truck broke down, we were behind on the mortgage. You knew things were tight." "No one asked me," I said softly. "We don't need to ask," he snapped. "It's your turn. We've done enough." In the background, my mom's voice pierced the noise, laughing like this was all a joke. She said, "What were you gonna do? Buy yourself a birthday cake?" That line, it sliced right through me, because it was my birthday, in 2 hours technically, and for once, I hadn't planned a thing. No dinner, no gathering, just maybe a cake for myself and a long bath. I had no expectations, just the hope that I could feel okay. But apparently, even that was too much. The speakerphone went quiet. I could hear them talking in the background, something about extra champagne. They thought I was still on the line. I could have screamed, could have demanded they return every cent. But instead, I inhaled slowly, and I said, "Then don't ever call me again." Then I hung up, just like that. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their daughter. I felt like a stranger who had been squatting in their illusion of family. I stared at the ceiling for a long while. No tears. Not yet. I got out of bed, padded to the kitchen, turned on the dim light above the stove. The stillness felt like the only thing I could control. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts. Auto pay? Canceled. Emergency contact? Removed. Password? Changed. One tab after another. I combed through every account. Utilities, insurance, subscriptions. They were all in my name. I hadn't even noticed how much had accumulated over the years, how I'd slowly become their financial backbone just because I could and because no one else would. And there it was, buried in a PDF, the mortgage. It was mine. The house I never lived in, that I didn't even have a key to, signed under my name because my mom's credit score wouldn't qualify. At the time, they told me it was just temporary. That was 6 years ago. I scrolled through statements, Payment after payment, each one timed right before a vacation, a medical emergency, or a new unexpected expense. I remembered how they'd always phrase it, "You're the stable one." Like that made me their lifeline. But tonight, something shifted. I wasn't just hurt, I was awake. I didn't want revenge, I wanted my life back. I clicked open the mortgage account. There was a button, Manage Payments. I hovered over Cancel Recurring. My hand didn't shake this time. It was still dark outside. I was still in my pajamas. The tea kettle hadn't even boiled. But in that quiet moment, I felt more powerful than I had in years. Not angry, not screaming, just done. Not anymore. I whispered to no one. Then I clicked. The screen spun. Confirmation. Recurring payment canceled. I sat back in my chair, my hands resting in my lap, the silence growing heavier but cleaner. It didn't feel like losing them. It felt like finding me. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring into the dark, wondering if any of it was ever real. I didn't move for a while, didn't cry either. The silence in the apartment wrapped around me like a heavy coat I hadn't chosen to wear but didn't have the strength to take off. Eventually, the light outside the window began to shift. Morning was crawling in, dragging a faint gray across the sky. I hadn't slept, not even a blink. My body was still, but my brain hadn't stopped pacing. I reached for my laptop again. Not out of habit, but because there was one more thing nagging at me. Something didn't feel right. Not just the stolen money, not just the mortgage. Something else, like I'd left a door open and someone had walked through. I opened my email. Just routine, I told myself, just clearing out junk. But 3 messages down, one subject line made me pause. Account alert, statement ready, Horizon Platinum card. I didn't have a Horizon Platinum card. I clicked. The email looked real. The type of formatting I'd recognize if I had actually signed up. I followed the link, heart pounding harder now than it had all night. It asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number. I typed them in. Then it asked for verification, an email I hadn't used since college, my old .edu account. My stomach dropped. I reset the password, logged in, and there it was, an open credit card account with a $25,000 limit. Balance, $24,163. The charges were all there. Large deposits to a PayPal address I didn't recognize, designer clothes, a payment toward a used Ford truck in someone else's name. My name, technically, but not my life. I sat back. How long had this been going on? I skimmed the account opening details. Opened under my name, my social. The address, my parents' house. The phone number, my mother's. My jaw clenched. Flashbacks hit like blunt force. I remembered Dad saying at the kitchen table one night, "Just put it under Luna. She pays everything on time." He laughed like it was a compliment. Mom nodded along like it was obvious. That was when I'd co-signed her medical credit for a surgery she never mentioned again. It was just temporary, she said. 3 months tops. That was 4 years ago. Now I couldn't tell where temporary ended and full-scale identity theft began. The worst part? I didn't even think they saw it as stealing. To them, it was borrowing, from someone who owed them anyway. Because I was the one who got out, the one who made it, the one who always came through. They didn't see me. They saw access. I closed the laptop, needing a break from the screen. I stood up, stretched stiff limbs, and walked to the kitchen, trying to find some grounding in normal things. I made coffee, poured it into the mug that said, "World's Best Daughter," the one Mom gave me years ago. Suddenly, it felt like a cruel joke. I sat on the couch and picked up my phone. A moment passed, and muscle memory took over. I opened Instagram. The very first story at the top was from Callista, my older sister. Her face filled the screen, perfectly made up, with that fake surprised laugh she always did when the camera was rolling. Behind her, a crowd cheered. Balloons spelled out "New Beginnings" in glittery gold. The caption? "Family always shows up." I turned the sound on. The camera panned across the room. Familiar faces filled the frame. Cousins, aunts, my parents, smiling, clapping, toasting. And then came Mom. She raised her glass and said, "We're so proud of our girl. She's the light in this family, always has been." The room applauded. Someone shouted, "To Callista!" It was today, my birthday. The timestamp on the story was just an hour ago. That's what they did with the money. That's where they were last night. That was the music I heard on the phone when I called to ask about the missing $69,000. They weren't celebrating anything new. They were celebrating her and erasing me. I set the phone down slowly, like it might shatter if I moved too fast. I stared at the wall. For a long time, I thought I was just forgotten, overlooked, not flashy enough, not dramatic enough to be the one they talked about. I was the steady one, the logical one, the one who worked late and showed up early. I thought maybe they were too distracted, too focused on Callista's constant chaos. But this wasn't distraction. This was choice, deliberate, repeated, strategic. They used my name, my credit, my money, because it was useful. But when it came to presents, to celebration, to basic human recognition, they gave it all to her. I wasn't part of the toast. I wasn't invited. I wasn't anything to them unless they needed a signature or a security code. I walked into my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a small box of keepsakes, notes, movie stubs, birthday cards I'd mailed to myself in years past when I knew they'd forgotten. One card was still sealed. I held it in my hand. It was from 5 years ago. I'd written myself a simple line inside, trying to soften the sting that year. "You're still here, and that matters." I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I just placed it back and closed the drawer. Then I opened my phone again. I scrolled to the family group chat. 12 names, dozens of threads, old photos, vacation plans, inside jokes. I didn't say anything. I just hit leave chat. It asked me if I was sure. I was. I confirmed. And just like that, the room got quieter. Not lonelier, just less full of noise that had never been meant for me. I whispered aloud. I gave them everything, and they gave me absence. And I wasn't going to carry that silence for them anymore. But absence doesn't hurt as much when you finally accept it was intentional. The next few days passed in a strange kind of quiet, not peaceful, just suspended. Like my world had stopped moving, but the rest of Bloomington didn't get the memo. Outside, people were mowing lawns, picking up groceries, waving at their neighbors. Meanwhile, I moved through my apartment like I was walking through someone else's house. I didn't answer messages, didn't return emails. I barely spoke to anyone outside of the barista at the corner cafe. It wasn't depression, it was awareness. And that kind of clarity takes time to sit with. By the 5th day, a stack of mail had collected in my entryway. I sorted through it with no urgency. Mostly junk, a few medical ads, one coupon for car detailing I'd never use. Then I saw the envelope. Thick, official looking, my full name printed in bold typeface. I opened it, expecting maybe a tax form or a notice from my insurance company. Instead, it was a mortgage delinquency letter. I stared at the heading for a full 10 seconds before anything registered. Notice of delinquency, 4 missed payments. It had to be a mistake. I don't own a house. I live in a rental apartment with beige carpet and a window that overlooks a grocery store parking lot. There is no white picket fence, no yard to mow, no fireplace to call my own, except for one place. Their place. The house my parents called home for the past 7 years, the one they always referred to as ours. Not mine, not Luna's name is on the title, just ours. I sank into the kitchen chair and reread the notice. Payment history, late fees, escrow imbalance. It was all real, and it was all under my name. I pulled up my laptop, hands trembling. I logged into the loan servicer's portal, one I hadn't touched in over a year. I thought they had refinanced. They'd said they were going to. They said I was just helping them get qualified. That was the deal. But the deal had expired a long time ago. The name on the loan, Luna Wren, primary borrower. I clicked through the payment history. Missed payments started 4 months ago. Interest had accrued. My credit score had quietly taken a hit while I was busy minding my own business. I closed the browser, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. I remembered that conversation like it was yesterday, back when I was 26, fresh out of grad school, still clinging to the hope that approval would come if I just did one more thing. Mom had sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded like she was praying. "We're just stuck, honey," she'd said, voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "It's just a formality. We need your credit score to get the loan through. We'll handle the payments. Promise." And I believed her. I believed that helping meant being included, that co-signing meant shared responsibility, shared gratitude, shared love. I believed that being useful would buy me a seat at the table. Instead, they built a home with my signature and told everyone else it was theirs. Now, 4 missed payments later, they hadn't called me. Not to warn me, not to explain, not even to lie. They just let it rot. I clicked open the property records site for Hennepin County and pulled the deed. My name stood alone. No secondary signer, no equity split. I owned the whole thing. I just didn't live there. And somehow, that hurt worse than if they'd just taken my money, because money could be replaced. But identity, that's harder to reclaim. They made me the roof over their heads, the walls around their holidays, the floor they stood on when they toasted Callista and forgot I existed. And yet, they never once called it mine. I was the structure, but I was never the family inside it. That night, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching headlights sweep across the parking lot. Somewhere in that house, someone was probably watching TV, eating dinner, complaining about me. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't write a message. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I walked back to my desk and opened a spreadsheet I hadn't touched since college budgeting days. I renamed it Severance. Line 1, Mortgage, Cancel Autopay. Line 2, Pull Title History. Line 3, Notify Credit Agency of Misuse. I would treat it like a business transaction now. Cold, factual, strategic. I had loved them with emotion. They had used me with calculation. That was the difference. And from now on, I would match energy. They gave me a house to protect that they never invited me into. I'd give them a boundary they couldn't breach again. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just breaking ties. I was revoking their access to me. By midweek, I'd begun settling into a new mental rhythm. Not peace, just structure. I created lists, sorted files, disconnected autopays. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry. But then the envelope came. It was waiting on my doormat when I returned from work. Large, cream-colored, heavy. My first instinct was medical, some lab results or benefit statement. I nearly tossed it onto the kitchen table unopened, but something about the seal, a gold-embossed courthouse insignia, made me stop. I slit the edge carefully and unfolded the contents. Notice of civil suit. Summons to appear. Court of Hennepin County. My name. My social. My address. The debt? A personal loan, $22,000, due and unpaid. I read the first page again, slower. The words were all there, stacked neatly in official fonts and legalese, but they didn't make sense together. Because I never applied for a personal loan. Ever. I sat down hard on the couch, letter shaking in my hand. The loan had been opened during the pandemic. That year I was barely sleeping, working remote full-time, and covering the mortgage for a house I didn't live in. I wasn't taking vacations, I wasn't buying designer bags or doing home renovations, but apparently someone else was. I skimmed further. Attached were documents of the loan application, copies of the contract, a signature, almost like mine, but off, a little too rounded at the end. My signature usually cut sharper. It was forged, poorly, but just enough to pass unless you knew me. I called the creditor's office, hand steady now, voice calm. A young-sounding agent answered, chipper and clueless. "Hi, I'm calling about a lawsuit filed under my name, the account ending in 1138. I never opened that loan." He paused, then asked, "Can I confirm your social, ma'am?" I gave it. He hummed while clicking keys, then said, "It shows you as the borrower, opened April 2020. Payment stopped 6 months ago." "I didn't open that," I repeated. Another pause. Is it possible, he said slowly, that a family member opened it with your permission? Happens a lot, parents helping kids, or vice versa. My mouth opened and nothing came out, not right away, because in that moment I realized something terrifying. I didn't even know if it was permission anymore. Maybe I had said something vague, months before, like, "Sure, whatever you need," during a panicked conversation. Maybe I had left a document lying around. Maybe I had just been predictable. I was the reliable one, the easy mark. I let silence sit on the line until the agent said, "Ma'am?" "I'll be filing fraud," I said. "Thank you." Then I hung up. No tears, just a single exhale. I didn't call my parents. There was nothing left to ask. Instead, I logged into my bank account. I hadn't combed through the old auto transfers in years. Back then, I thought I was just doing what a good daughter does. Helping, picking up groceries, paying the cable bill, keeping things afloat while Dad was between jobs. But seeing the numbers again now, row by row, painted a different story. Thousands over the years. Not gifts, not occasional help. A system. They'd automated their dependence on me, and I'd kept feeding it like it was love. I sat back, letting my shoulders fall, and whispered into the quiet room, "The debt they dumped on me now costs more than my childhood ever did." The spreadsheet from last week, severance, was still open on my laptop. I added a new folder beside it, legal exit. I started uploading everything, screenshots, copies of the forged loan, mortgage records, email chains. I typed out a short message to my lawyer. Subject line, "Prepare disassociation." I ended it simply. I need to separate myself financially from my family. Fully. Permanently. It felt brutal typing those words, but it also felt overdue. Later that weekend, I met up with Melanie from work, one of the few people who noticed something had shifted in me lately. We sat outside at a quiet cafe, coffee in hand, her expression cautious. "You look tired," she said. "I am." "You said you wanted to talk?" I hesitated, then just said it. "My parents used my name for years, for loans, for property, for credit." She blinked. "You mean like they co-signed things?" "No," I said. "I signed. They didn't." She looked stunned, her brow furrowed. "But they're your parents." And for once, I didn't flinch at the obvious. I met her eyes, steady. "No. They were my creditors in disguise." She didn't say anything at first, just let the words hang there heavy. I appreciated that. It's rare when people don't rush to fill silence. "Do you want me to recommend someone?" she finally asked. "A financial advisor?" I nodded. "That would help." We sat for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing, weather, work, a new place opening on Lyndale Avenue. But inside me, something was rearranging, not just boundaries, but identity. They used my name and let it bleed. Now it was mine again, and I wasn't going to let it leak any further. Just when I thought they'd finally said all they could, the silence cracked. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just made tea, chamomile, a little honey. I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a missed call and a voicemail notification from my mother. I hesitated before pressing play. I didn't want to hear her voice, but my thumb moved anyway. Her tone was calm, controlled, a little too smooth, like she'd rehearsed it. "Hi, sweetheart. Your dad slipped. Broke his leg in the garage. He's at the county hospital. They're saying no surgery until someone pays part of the cost up front. And, well, he doesn't have insurance. We know you're upset. We know things have been tense. But this is family." No apology. No explanation for why they hadn't called before the surgery was on hold. No acknowledgement of what they'd already taken. Just that, this is family. I stood in the kitchen, the dryer still humming in the background, and stared at the floor like it might have answers. Then muscle memory kicked in. I opened my banking app. I checked my checking balance, then the emergency savings. I could afford it. Not comfortably, but enough. For a moment, I almost moved to write the check. It was like my hands remembered the script, even when my heart didn't. You always step up. You always do. I grabbed my checkbook from the desk drawer, sat down, wrote out the hospital's name, $2,000. Then I paused. A breeze from the open window rustled the folder on the far side of my desk. History. I had labeled it that weeks ago when all this began. Not evidence, not receipts. History. I reached for it. Inside were screenshots of text messages, Mom asking for a small loan that was never paid back, Dad promising to transfer it right back next week, copies of forged loan applications, the mortgage paperwork, a copy of the court summons with my name on it, page after page, not of misunderstandings, but of patterns, calculated ones. And suddenly that calm voice on the voicemail didn't sound helpless, it sounded transactional. I closed the checkbook without tearing out the page. They don't need help, I murmured aloud. They need access. That was when the second voicemail arrived, this one from Grandma Wynne. Not my mother's mother, my father's, the one who lived 3 hours north and baked the only birthday cake I ever remember feeling excited to eat. The one who still called me Little Bean, even though I turned 35 last week. I played her message twice. Honey, I heard what happened. Don't you dare carry their weight again. You're not wrong. You're just done. And that's not the same thing. That one cracked me open in a different way. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that someone saw me. Someone who mattered. Someone who wasn't using me as a lifeline they'd long since decided they were entitled to. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a cup of black coffee, windows open, breeze rolling in soft from the west. I pulled out my checkbook again. This time I wrote a check, payable to Luna Wynne memo line, Peace Fund. It was symbolic, sure, but real enough. I deposited it to a separate account, the kind I never told anyone about. My name, my money, my life. Then I texted my cousin Amanda, my dad's sister's daughter, the one who always played neutral at family barbecues, who watched things happen but never said much. Until last year, when she moved across the country and told me, "You don't owe anyone anything that costs you your dignity." I typed, "Tell them I hope he heals. I really do, but I won't bleed to cover their wounds again." No explanation, no justification, just facts. Because the real shift wasn't that I was saying no, it was that I didn't feel guilty for it anymore. Friday dawned cold and clean. The kind of morning where even the birds sounded like they had boundaries. I opened the window a crack. The air stung, but it cleared my head better than coffee ever had. I didn't need to journal. Didn't need a therapist to validate the decision I'd already made in my marrow. They didn't expect silence to fight back harder than screaming. Still wearing a worn hoodie and mismatched socks, I slid into the chair by my desk, cracked my knuckles once, and opened my laptop. The screen lit up with tabs I'd left open the night before. Mortgage login, Verizon Wireless, Amazon Family, Hulu, Bank of the Midwest, every portal they'd ever tethered themselves to through me. Click, cancel, next, revoke access, then again, click, revoke, The rhythm became mechanical, almost meditative. The phone plan I'd added them to in 2019? Gone. The Prime account my mom used to send herself treats on my card? Gone. The shared iCloud family plan? Canceled. It was like sweeping cobwebs no one else had admitted were there, but I'd been choking on them for years. By noon, I was already on the phone with my attorney. "Luna," she said cautiously, "are you sure you want to go full disassociation? Power of attorney? All financial proxies?" "I'm not cutting them out of my life," I answered calmly. "They cut me into pieces. I'm just taking back what's left." We finalized paperwork in under 30 minutes. She promised to draft the legal letters notifying the mortgage company and every creditor that any future attempt to use my information would be formally contested. After the call, I leaned back. The screensaver glowed in soft color swirls across my laptop. I hadn't cried all morning, not because I wasn't hurting, but because something deeper had taken hold. resolve. It was almost evening when I decided to clean out my closet, not out of sentiment, but because I needed to feel lighter, in control. I pulled out old shoeboxes, dust-lined sweaters, a scarf from a winter I'd rather forget. Then, tucked behind a stack of old donation bags, I saw it, a small white box tied with faded blue ribbon. I blinked. It took a second before I remembered. 5 years ago. My birthday. I'd spent the day alone, and in a strange attempt at self-love, I'd handmade a card for my mother, a thank you for raising me, for keeping us together when things were tight. I'd dropped it in her mailbox that evening. She never mentioned it. I'd assumed she'd thrown it out, but here it was, still sealed, never opened. She had returned it in a bag of your things months later without a word. I opened the lid. Inside, the envelope, my handwriting, the tiny glitter heart in the corner. I didn't cry, didn't flinch. I just stared, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I already knew. Even my love was disposable. I tucked it back inside, closed the lid, and dropped it into the trash. No need to keep souvenirs from a story I was no longer writing myself into. That night, the calls started, not pleading, confused. Riley, my cousin, left a voicemail. Luna, the truck's gone. Repossessed? Did something happen? Then Mom. Hey, honey. The mortgage company said your name's been removed from the system. Can we talk? No, we couldn't. I let the phone ring out. No voicemail was ever returned. Silence, I had discovered, wasn't passive. It was precision. Each unanswered call was a boundary reinforced. I wasn't being cruel. I was being exact. The next day, I moved through the rest like a woman with a checklist, shared cloud accounts, deleted, all passwords, changed, credit file, frozen. Then, finally, my favorite part, I opened a brand new bank account, no family names, no ties, just me, Luna Wynn, first, middle, last, mine. It was almost midnight when I closed the lid of my laptop and leaned back in the chair. My apartment was quiet, warm, still. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged, but I'd severed every cord, and they were just starting to realize it. I had barely set down my coffee when the envelope slid through my apartment mailbox with that faint scrape that always made my stomach tighten. But this time it wasn't a bill or another legal twist. It was a wedding invitation. Ava. Her handwriting was unmistakable, loopy cursive, always in teal ink. You've always been there for me, the note inside read. I want you here. I hadn't seen her much since everything with my parents and Callista went public, or as public as betrayal could feel within the bloodlines of a fractured family. But Ava? She had always been different. She was the only one who remembered my birthday last year without needing a Facebook reminder. She was my anchor before I even knew I was adrift. Still, I hesitated. I knew who would be at that wedding, and who wouldn't be able to keep their eyes, or their judgments, to themselves. But I texted her back anyway. I'll be there. The wedding was held at a glass-ceiling venue in downtown Minneapolis, not far from where Ava and I used to meet for pancakes when we were both broke and homesick in college. But this building was pristine, marble floors, flower arrangements taller than most guests. The air smelled like money and lilac and something that tried too hard to be timeless. I arrived early. I didn't want to, but I did. Habit, maybe. Control. I wore a black satin dress, simple neckline, no jewelry. Hair pinned back in the way my mother always said made me look unapproachable. Perfect. As I stepped inside, I felt it like a shift in barometric pressure. Heads turned, whispers ignited in corners. A few people smiled. Most didn't. My mother froze where she stood, mid-laugh. My father stopped mid-sentence, his mouth slightly parted, a drink still hovering near his lips. Neither moved toward me, they just watched. I didn't falter. I found the check-in table, gave my name, and waited. Oh, the woman hesitated, flipping the place cards. I don't see you on the family list. Let me check the guest tables. Oh, here you are, table 9. I smiled and nodded. Table 9. Not the family table. Not even close. I crossed the ballroom, heels echoing gently. Table 9 was filled with Ava's old college friends. They welcomed me with easy grins, made space, offered a glass of champagne like I belonged. I let myself accept it. Not the drink, but the ease. I smiled back, sat down, and I let the others wonder if I was about to ruin something. Dinner was elegant, understated. I moved through the courses mechanically, not hungry, not distracted. But midway through, the lights dimmed slightly and a projector flickered to life. A slideshow, the usual montage, baby photos, messy teenage grins, graduation caps, love letters caught in snapshots. Then came a post. A caption glowed across the screen. "Proud of our girl for putting this together. Love, Valora." The room clapped politely. My hand froze on my glass, because the post was tagged to Callista. But the image? It was one of my design templates, an event layout I'd created 5 years ago when I still believed that helping meant I belonged. The colors, the font, the format, it was mine. But no one in the room knew, or they did and chose not to say a word. I blinked slowly. Valora walked past my table then, pretending not to notice I was there until the last second. She stopped, placed a hand lightly on the back of my chair like we were old friends. "You look different." I turned to her, calm, not cold, controlled. "I am." She tried to smile. I didn't offer one back. I added, voice steady and quiet, "I'm here for Ava, not you." The room didn't silence, but something between us did. She withdrew her hand. Her eyes glistened, not from guilt or grief, but the sharp sting of losing control. I watched her walk away, her spine rigid, her pace just a bit too measured. And in that moment, I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt real, whole. I stayed for Ava's vows, clapped when appropriate, hugged her when she passed by, told her she looked radiant because she did. Then, when the music grew louder and the speeches became more about drinks than sentiment, I slipped out the side door, unnoticed. They hadn't expected me to show up. They hadn't expected me to stay quiet. But I did. And in that silence, I'd said everything I needed to. The morning after Ava's wedding, I was folding laundry in silence, a simple habit that calmed my thoughts, when my phone buzzed with a notification, then another and another. I glanced at the screen. 3 separate people had forwarded the same video. I didn't recognize the account at first, just the profile picture, a soft focus cross and a faded photo of a potluck, Valora's church group. I clicked play. A narrator's voice, overly soft, began. She left her sick father. No support, just cruelty. Then it cut to a slowed-down clip from the wedding, me walking past my parents' table without stopping, my face unreadable, my shoulders squared. A still shot froze on my mother's tearful expression. Dramatic music played in the background. Caption: "Sometimes your children forget who raised them." Below it, the comments poured in. "Shameful. She looks heartless. What kind of daughter turns her back like that?" I didn't blink. I just closed the app and opened my desktop folder. It wasn't rage that moved me. It was clarity. They wanted control back, and this time they thought they'd weaponize sympathy. But I'd spent years being quiet, years being used, drained, erased. Not this time. I didn't write a dramatic paragraph. I didn't film myself crying in my car. I posted receipts. First, PDF scans of the hospital bills I'd already paid 6 weeks ago, the ones that covered Dad's broken leg, highlighted. Then, a screenshot of the mortgage history showing my name as the sole borrower, 14 years, every payment. Next, emails from the credit card company confirming the fraud reports I'd filed, with call time stamps, loan account numbers, and signed affidavits. Then came the legal disassociation form, my lawyer's letterhead, dated, notarized. I arranged them cleanly in a carousel, captioned it with 10 words. They called it family. I called it debt. You decide. I pressed post. Then I turned off my notifications. That night, I didn't dream. The next morning, I showed up to the HOA meeting, where Valora had been sitting on the board for over a decade, known for her potluck chili and endless chatter about her home's integrity. I wore jeans and a gray blouse. Simple, unapologetic. I was just there to vote on new street lamps. But as soon as I entered the community room, I felt it. The silence wasn't the usual boredom. It was loaded. A man from our block leaned in and asked, "Hey, is it true your name was on the deed, not hers?" Another woman near the snacks added, "We always wondered how she managed that house with her credit." Valora sat stiffly at the head of the table, lips pressed together. She looked smaller than I remembered. When the first agenda item came up, she stood and mumbled something about not feeling well, then grabbed her purse and walked out. Her husband hesitated, then followed. No one chased after them. Later that evening, Ava texted me, "Whatever happens next, thank you for not letting them rewrite you." I stared at her message a long time before replying, "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted them to stop using my silence as a signature." And they did. Their church group took the video down. Their Facebook profiles went private. Callista, who'd just landed a small brand deal with a home decor startup, had her contract quietly canceled. The post didn't go viral. There was no grand applause. And I didn't want one. What I gained wasn't a standing ovation. It was air. It was space. It was finally enough room to breathe in my own name, without someone else signing underneath it. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the stillness. It had been exactly 1 year. No birthday reminders from a shared family calendar. No voicemail from my mother, pretending things were fine. No obligatory text from Callista that read more like a PR memo than a sentiment. But also, no overdraft alerts. No phone calls masked as demands. No messages with guilt curled between the lines. Just quiet. I rolled over and checked my phone out of habit. A single notification blinked back at me. My monthly bank statement. Balance. Steady. Credit score. Healed. A small smile curled at the edge of my lips. No drama. Just progress. That's when the doorbell rang. I didn't rush. I slipped on a sweater, tied my hair back, and padded to the door barefoot. Standing outside was Ava, holding a white cake box with a red ribbon wrapped casually around it. "No candles," she said with a tilt of her head. "You don't need to wish. You built it already." I didn't respond. I just stepped aside and let her in. We sat at my small kitchen table, sunlight filtering through the window. She cut us each a slice, and we ate in near silence, just the clink of forks and a breeze brushing the curtains. Sometimes the loudest healing happens when nobody speaks. Midway through, Ava looked at me and asked, "Are you okay, really?" I nodded. Still bruised, but not broken anymore. After she left, I walked over to my bookshelf to straighten a stack of journals. That's when I saw it, tucked between 2 old planners, the birthday card, the one I had bought 5 years ago, meant for my mother, never delivered, still sealed. I held it for a moment, then peeled the flap open. The inside was blank. Back then, I hadn't known what to write. Now I did. In small, even letters, I wrote one word: goodbye. No dramatic flair, no essay, just finality. I folded it gently, walked it to the trash can, and let it go. That's when the email arrived. A burner account. No subject line, just a string of vague guilt. "We didn't raise you to be like this." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I set my phone down and whispered, more to the quiet than to myself. "But you did. You raised me to endure. I just stopped letting you collect interest." Later that evening, Ava texted again, "Can I post that photo of us from earlier?" I didn't even hesitate. "Go for it." An hour later, I saw it on her feed, a snapshot of the 2 of us mid-laugh, forks raised mid-air, the cake between us half-eaten. The caption read, "You were never the problem. You were the first to escape." But what struck me wasn't the photo. It was what sat quietly in the background, on a nearby shelf, almost blurred, an old family photo frame, the same one that used to sit on my parents' mantle. Only this time, my part of the photo had been cut out. They had literally cropped me out years ago and left the frame on Ava's shelf like a relic. I looked at that frame through the screen and didn't feel bitterness. I felt peace. Because that frame, once meant to remind people who belonged, now showed what didn't fit anymore, and for the first time, I was grateful not to be inside it. As the sun dipped below the edge of the blinds, I lit a small candle, not for wishes, just for the ritual. I didn't make a toast, didn't blow anything out. I left the window open and let the air shift through the room. I breathed in. I didn't cry, didn't smile either. Healing isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's just quiet and long overdue. Letting go of people who only see your value when you're useful isn't cruelty, it's clarity.